Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now you might be wondering why we are doing this video right this second. Well, we'll get to the exact impetus for this particular outing in a bit, but I think it's safe to say that any chance for us to talk about this guy will always be welcome here. And we all should be talking about him, quite frankly, because I think, and have thinks, that Dragon Ball Z missed a trick here, and the franchise because of it. Instead of doing what JoJo's done and basically reused the first villain, Dio, over and over again in various iterations and permutations or indirect connections, you somehow tie back to Dio, the first villain of DBZ's just vanished after one little joke from King Yemma. Yeah, today we are talking about Raditz. What a surprise! From a channel which is basically known for standing Raditz to Hiffle and back. And we know you like it too. Don't you judge us. You'd only be judging yourself. You know, Dragon Ball villains tend to return a lot in supplemental material. In fact, many other properties do the same thing. Whether it be movies, specials, games, trading cards, other kinds of merch, it's safe to say that if you were involved in some capacity in the main theme, trying to stop the Dragon Team, you would be considered to be used in a property of the show at some point in the future. We had Frieza Soldier in the Tenkaichi games. That guy, he was in one shot from the anime and yet got brought in for a game. I mean, yes, Arxis does its research, but the guy who okayed that idea for the Bandai games of old? Hats off to you, sir. You get that as a low-level goon. But if you were one of the big three, you achieved immemorial status. We see Frieza returning all the time to, or even surpassing his prime from when he first ventured into the series. In Heroes, we can see Cell, Kid Buu, and other movie villains shake things up a little bit, be cursed with Dark Dragon Balls and Cell X. Them reminding you that, yeah, they were a thing one day. And some of them, despite them being woefully underpowered today, if you want to compare, they could still pull something out of the ether and drag themselves back into relevancy. They achieve the impossible. Unless you factor in a little bit of the old cashola. Sometimes you do the absolute crazy act of thermo-dumping, and occasionally you have things like Fusion Reborn, or the Super 17 saga from GT, or the Krillin two-parter from Super, where everyone either escapes from Hiffle for some reason, or there is an army of doppelgangers or ghosts, which our heroes have to thwart somehow, but it is a good enough excuse to bring back some old faces from the archives for one last go in HD quality, as well as the chance for experts online to harp on about it for video after video. But within that flood of returning bad guys, one is notably less active than the others, because outside of video games, which have to go through his part in the story, where was the last time you saw Raditz doing anything? Okay, granted, Kakarot did him better, but that took decades to happen. And again, they had to do his bit, or else the start of Z wouldn't make any sense. But wait, you're about to point out to us that he was in recent media. Yes, you are not mistaken. If you say that we have seen him in the likes of the Broly movie, or the Granola flashbacks within the manga, you would be correct. No, that's not a spoiler. It was just one shot as part of a general flashback within the recent manga, with no real lasting consequence to your overall experience of that particular story once you get to it. Unless your headcanon was, of course, that Raditz was scared of bugs. Then you would be very sorely disappointed, and for that I'm sorry that we bugged you about it. With Kakarot, the game, there are moments which seemingly make it that you can do Raditz right, where you can actually ask Shenron to revive him, so he's not dead anymore. Okay, that's pretty cool on paper, but hold your space horses there, folks. The only reason you do that is so that Piccolo can use him as a punching bag. But it's still kind of interesting how the franchise treats this character that arguably took the status quo of Dragon Ball and then flipped it on its head. Also, you do get a little bit of his backstory from the Dokkan Battle games, that was added, and then a side mission in World Mission, you know, that Switch game, where we could see him as Super Saiyan 3. Mostly for the memes though, it didn't really amount to much meaningful action from him, and it's not a lasting power. And if you want to get even more frustrated by his lack of inclusion, even the guy who made Dragon Ball and the Daizenshu guides, the additional material, they can't decide about what he is. Here's what Daizenshu 7 referred to Raditz as. Born as a lowest level warrior, he lacks experience fighting to the death against strong opponents, and so his battle power is of the lowest level for a Saiyan. Okay, that seems a bit heavy-handed, but at least in keeping with the community at large's view of him, sort of understandable. Then there is Toriyama's recent comments from 2017 in one of the Super Manga Q&A sessions. Raditz was an upper-level warrior and assigned to the same group as Nappa as a proper combatant. Before long, Vegeta was added to that group too. Okay, so that means that makes Raditz a mid-class Saiyan now? And that Raditz and Nappa were originally a double act and then Vegeta joined them later? I'm sorry, what? Needless to say though, if these two examples can't decide what Raditz actually is to the franchise, then the fandom's gonna do it for you. And what they have dubbed Raditz as is a complete and utter no-hooper, where he is the butt of all the jokes, even more so than Krillin. And that's saying something. We here on this channel have done our part to do him justice with our various series and videos, giving Raditz some more stuff to do in the time of day, as well as a better life, but that can only go so far because in the end, it's fan-made stuff. And the only way that Raditz can get any sort of relevance today is through the medium of fanworks. Even the likes of the most zany and meta Dragon Ball animation isn't doing anything with him. And you could do practically anything in that, and it wouldn't be questioned. During our most recent Roundtable livestream, where you can have your say for future content, we got 2 super chats from these fine fellows here, as well as many other regulars vocalizing their support for these notions, asking about the likes of Cumber from Super Dragon Ball Heroes. You know, that promotional anime which tried to be a super facsimile but totally wasn't. And nobody cares about because seriously, the views on those reviews, practically nothing. And they were wondering about his relation to Raditz, Cumber. Was there any? As you can see, this question is making even James Cameron ponder about this during his work on the Avatar sequels. We are not the only ones that were kinda disappointed that beneath that mask there was just a guy. It wasn't a double bluff or some kind of alter ego or alias or twist. It was just a random ancient Saiyan that we really would not care about, with no personality. Even less personality than OG Broly from 1993. Did you even think that was possible, folks? I sure as hell didn't. But could you imagine how much more hype there would have been for the beginning of this promotional anime if Cumber wasn't Cumber, but a Raditz from a different reality? A reality where he not only survived, but he then trained, got bulky, manifested evil and dark thoughts as well as that magic, and then had become one of the most terrifying Saiyans, no, most terrifying individuals imaginable in that particular reality. Plucked out from it by few to be used as some kind of trophy or plaything. He would then be wielded as one of his weapons or toys to challenge and defeat other Dragon Team fighters from different timelines, and with his berserker touch, corrupt them, and then add them to fuse ranks to then create even more devilish people and a big berserker force under that guy's control. Only that didn't happen, and again, it's just a bloke from the ancient times. So yes, this is one of the biggest failed opportunities going for this guy, in my opinion. And quite frankly, if Raditz appears now, he would be, well, laughed out of the door again. Even if you included him in Season 4 of Fighters now, there would be those that would either not play as him, or make machinima of him being a sop, or just say, oh, Arxis has just run out of ideas. To put it in terms that you might be able to understand, he basically has been Yamcha'd, relegated into being a laughingstock sort of character. Arguably more so than even Pilaf's gang, who nowadays actually do stuff, playing the roles of Bulma's little helpers. They get to contribute every now and again. So does Yamcha, even if it's just for yucks or baseball. But Raditz, he's just been left forgotten. But why? When there could have been much more money made out of his reintroduction and resurgence. So without further ado, let's think about the main reasons why Raditz was so underused when compared to other villains from the series. Putting our own personal bias aside, when you look at this conundrum on paper, Raditz has everything you need in order to give him a decent prompt to return. There are some very valid and reasonable reasons to bring him back in some sort of capacity in this day and age of multiple media streams. First of all, and this is something no other villain has, he is directly related to the main character, where he changed the status quo of the show, and he has some pretty unique techniques. He also shares the same potential and genetics as Goku, thusly, If the circumstances allowed for it, and he wasn't written to be one of the most cowardly Saiyans going, he could have followed a similar path or trajectory of power progression as his little brother. Sure, it's not like he's completely gone. He's still roaming the plains of Hiffle to some extent, but rarely is he a character of its own in recent appearances. He's sort of just retreading what he's already done, sort of just going back on that same bit over and over again. There's been no change or development or modification. But yeah, if we were to blame anything specifically, it would be that Raditz had the misfortune to be the first opponent of Dragon Ball Z, meaning that although a lot of things he did had been somewhat pioneering at the time, they would then be subsequently overshadowed when you naturally have to up the ante. It's a common symptom for any story. The first arc is rarely remembered as being the greatest, or the most epic, or the most detailed. So understandably, there were characters after him who, in the eyes of the creative bods behind Dragon Ball, did the stuff that Raditz did better. With more flashy imagery, more intense dialogue, and with even greater stakes, going from scorching worlds to tearing them apart, and then even eviscerating entire states of reality when you get to the likes of Super. Besides, when you're asked to conjure up the identity of an evil Saiyan out of the ether, aside from Vegeta, you would probably go for Nappa, as he was much more savage than Raditz was in the story, and also has his connections with Vegeta. And yes, of course, Team 4 stars, Vegeta. Why go for smaller fry when you can go for the big fish, and Nappa's pretty big? It's exactly the same problem as Kid Buu has. Despite him being the most chaotic and insane version of Buu going, he's not the strongest. Buu-Tanks is. If you go with the manga, of course. But watch our video on that topic for further elaboration, okay? If you only have one slot for a Saiyan Saga character, Vegeta doesn't count, you go for the one later in the story, which is Nappa, who had the most visceral iconography going with his volcano explosion technique. Even GT gave it one more outing. Yes, even Dr. Giro's a victim of this neglect, this kind. But this is not where Raditz's problems end. There's more. Raditz is responsible for Goku's death. True. But Goku's first death has since been overshadowed by his second one, the one against Cell, arguably considered to be one of the most significant plot devices in the show's history, where Goku had to be mature and look at the bigger picture. And it also doesn't help that not long after Goku's first offing, we were quickly assured that, oh, don't worry, the team's gonna get him back as soon as possible. He'll be okay, he'll be back, thusly negating the entire act of Raditz terminating his own brother by proxy, even if it was Piccolo who fired the cannon. It can't be ignored though that Raditz was the first character that caused Goku to go bye-bye. No one else before had been able to do that. But Goku's sacrifice in the Cell Saga felt more meaningful and memorable at the time, pushing the first one out of the way. Our protagonist had just made a huge decision to remain dead afterwards, considering the well-being of his friends over his own resurrection. Well, at least for a little bit, when the plot decided that that was inconvenient, and then Toriyama took the torch back from Gohan and gave it to Goku again. Now this next point is debatable and might ruffle some feathers, but hear us out. For years now, Goku has been kept away from any specific details about his past or his parents. Up until very recently, he had no idea about Gine or Bardock or even their names. And only now, in the Granola Saga, has he discovered anything about them, his father, other than the occasional fluffy bit of dialogue from Vegeta in the past, which had no real significance anyway or meaning, since Vegeta never met Bardock. Do you see where we're going with this? Even if Raditz doesn't come back in a fighting capacity, if you just had Raditz around in general, he could easily answer a lot of these questions for Goku. Give him a semblance of what his family was like. All you gotta do is take away the need to fight, since Raditz wouldn't even bother to fight him since the gulf between them is too vast to scale. The extended universe of Dragon Ball has been flirting with this idea for years as well, them teasing us with not quite the meeting with Bardock. It's what the audience wants too, for Goku to understand more about his past, despite it not making any lick of sense when you use Bardock. That's right, Bardock, for some weird reason, is super popular, and he's been taking a lot of the exposition spotlight that could have belonged to Raditz. Surely Raditz and Goku talking about the past would be more logical, since they, I don't know, actually breathe the same air, and Raditz had tried to reason with his brother before realizing it was futile? That there was a degree of caring about his well-being in there? Whereas with Bardock, no. If you think about it though, Even though he lost, Bardock did impress, as he was the first Saiyan to stand up to Frieza. Despite that though, Raditz did things that were more narratively important, but they didn't really last all that long in the minds of the audience. Or at least, their consequences didn't. Those were largely acquired by Vegeta. The Prince became Goku's window on the Saiyan world, as much as Bardock became ours. The reintroduction of old characters usually is a good marketing tactic, and surely you can do it right by dedicating yourself to the characters. Or you can just completely cash grab it and merely attach a name of a popular character to the medium and hope for the best. The problem really is that we don't think that Toei, Shueisha, Bandai, or even Toyotaro believes in Raditz enough to think that he could handle his own big story arc these days. Sure, you can give him some side missions in a game, give him a small kid role from the past, to show that you at least remember that he exists, but you can't do really anything beyond that. Anything new? Shrugs all round. In the eyes of the creative team, Raditz as a villain is redundant. As in, he has played his role and can be replaced by literally anyone. And since anyone that could replace him has generated more hype than him since, then, well, good luck. But you know, maybe we're wrong, and maybe someday someone will see the potential of this character. Because we're sure that if the treatment for his return was done right, he could generate a lot of hype. R&R, as well as other Raditz-related stories across the internet, are only just the tip of the iceberg in the sea of Raditz-related content. And he does have a following in the fandom, a good one. And even though a lot of fans do not think about him on a daily basis, we are certainly sure that they would welcome him with open arms if he at least got the time to do stuff and come back. And if you want to see him come back in some way, do click the link here to see what could happen had he turned good.